So I'm just doing a quick review for the books that I've read over the month of May. Yes, we're in May. Okay, so the two books that I've read over the last month are Utopia Avenue by David Mitchell and the Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels, I think that's pronounced. If that's not correct, then I do apologise. Okay, so first book I read was Utopia Avenue. I was reading that last month and I finished that. So this is one of the very few fiction books that I read. I don't read a lot of fiction, but this book was suggested to me, and I've already read Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, which is a really excellently written book. So this book, again, very, very, very well written. Very, very good. If you like fiction, I don't think you can get much better. Very, really excellently written book. I've got to be honest, I wasn't really in the mood for a fiction at the time. I was feeling a bit like my head was full and I needed to think about serious things, and I didn't really have time for just fiction about a pop group in the late 60s in England. That wasn't really in the mood for it, but actually it was great. It was just what I needed. It was really, really enjoyable. And it had the sort of irreverent and fun side of being in a band in the late 60s and all the excitement and adventures and crazy things that they get up to. But it was also, you know, a sort of whole book with deep characters and things that came out that you weren't necessarily expecting. So it was really good. I really, really enjoyed it, and I felt really refreshed after I'd read it. Like, it was a really nice world to disappear into for a few weeks. So the book, it's about this band that's put together in the late 60s, and the story is sort of told from their different points of view. So each chapter is told by one of the band members, and that works really well. It's really nicely laid out in terms of the chapters being like tracks off of their records and things. That's all really nice. I appreciate that sort of thing. The characters are very different, so you've got people from different classes and different backgrounds, so that gives a really nice different view of life at that time and the way the world was. There's also some looking into sort of like mental health issues that one of them is dealing with, which is sort of a bit of a deep dive out of the book in its own way. So it sort of took it a little bit spiritual, a little bit different, which was good, which was really interesting and done very well. And then, yeah, the characters are very different. So they have different ways of looking at the world and ways that they interact with the world. And one of the things which David Mitchell was very, very good at is really getting into those different characters and making them different and making them individuals, so you don't feel like it's just one person writing from different perspectives. They really do feel like different people's views. So that was all done really well. There's different characters in there who are like real life characters from that time, from the whole music and celebrity industry. So there's familiar names and familiar stories in there. And then this is a fictional band, but it all pulls everything together really nicely. It was nice to see some characters out of Cloud Atlas in the book. That's really good. I like all that sort of thing. So it has the different narratives, and it covers the bands sort of getting together and their rise to fame. And then there are things covered to do with sort of drugs and pregnancy and family and sexuality, and like I said, sort of mental health as well, and yeah, just sort of dealing with all those different things that people have going on in their lives. It was really, really good. There was some real tearjerker moments in there as well. A few times I was really sort of brought out the emotion very strongly. And I think because it was so fun, a lot of the book, and very humorous and things like that, and then when you're sort of brought to tears by the next bit, it's like a really, really strong change. I think it's just amazing as well how books can bring out such strong emotions in you, because It's not like watching a film where you have all the visual effects and everything like that. It's just words. It's just words, and it's you reading words, and it's I think it's really impressive that it can bring out such strong emotions, and it's done so well in this book. The only thing I didn't like about the book is I didn't like the name Utopia Avenue. I just didn't. I didn't find it catchy enough. Like, didn't slip easily enough off the tongue, and I had Electric Avenue in my head for like the whole time I was reading the book, which was really irritating after about 2 days. But that's my only complaint. Other than that, it was a really good book. I really enjoyed it, and I did feel really sort of refreshed after reading a really good, decent fiction. So then I was ready to tackle the next book, which was the Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels. So I've wanted to read this book. I'm sort of interested in the Gnostics. I'm interested in, well, just trying to understand the world and what's going on, where we come from, what we're doing here, etc. And religion's a bit of a funny thing because it should be a kind of go-to, but it can often not give you the answers, or they don't feel right. So personally, I found it quite interesting to look into the older side of religion, including Christianity, the older versions of it, older teachings of it, to try and get more to the real sort of bones of it. The Gnostics have just always appealed to me, although a lot of the times when I've looked into what they believe, it just hasn't really felt right, and I'm not sure, didn't seem right. I started watching a YouTube channel called Esoterica, which I have recommended before, and I will definitely recommend them again. I was watching a brilliant video of theirs last night about Paul in the Christian religion, which was very, very interesting. And he was talking about the Gnostics. He talks about them a lot, and he recommended this book. And this book is just brilliant. So it's going through the Nag Hammadi scrolls, which I may be saying completely wrong, again apologies, which these are very old scrolls that were found in the last century, and they're thought to be over 1600 years old, which is kind of incredible, and they are really, really old religious texts from the early Christian time. And they include things like the Gospel of Truth, the Apocryphon, which is the secret book of John, and the Gospels of Thomas and Philip, and the secret book of James, as well as the poem Thunder Perfect Mind, which I might just read out. So a lot of these things as well, they're really kind of like profound. Anyway, it's just been so interesting to read these, and obviously for people who want to study them and things, it's just an incredibly exciting find. She also talks about how they were found, which is just kind of incredible and amazing, and just such chance. Makes you wonder what else is out there, really. Okay, so another text, mysteriously entitled The Thunder Perfect Mind, offers an extraordinary poem spoken in the voice of a feminine divine power. For I am the first and the last. I am the honoured one and the scorned one. I am the whore and the holy one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the barren one, and many are her sons. I am the silence that is incomprehensible. I am the utterance of my name. Okay, so these diverse texts range then from secret gospels, poems, and quasi-philosophical descriptions of the origin of the universe to myths, magic, and instructions for mystical practice. Like, this is really exciting stuff. So reading about it has been very exciting. Where are we? So she talks about some of the history of Christianity as well. I mean, it's just such an interesting time because you've had Jesus being alive. Jesus was Jewish, and obviously, and was part of this. There was a big sort of apocalyptic feeling that the end was coming, and Jesus was part of that. But obviously, when he died, his teachings then really came into their own, and it was really about him specifically and the things that he had said. But you had a real, it certainly was not a uniform movement. It was really, really fluid and dynamic and divergent, and there was just a lot going on in that whole movement for a long time. So talking about the history of Christianity, this campaign against heresy involved an involuntary admission of its persuasive power. So this is when the sort of what was trying to become the established church of like the sort of Roman Catholic Church was trying to like get rid of these Gnostic teachings. Okay, so this campaign against heresy involved an involuntary admission of its persuasive power. Yet the bishops prevailed. By the time of the Emperor Constantine's conversion, when Christianity became an officially approved religion in the 4th century, Christian bishops, previously victimised by the police, now commanded them. Possession of books denounced as heretical was made a criminal offence. Copies of such books were burned and destroyed. But in Upper Egypt, someone, possibly a monk from a nearby monastery of St. Pachomius, took the banned books and hid them from destruction in the jar where they remained buried for almost 1600 years. So it's just incredible. So I love looking into this time because it's just such a dynamic time of ideas and exploring and expansion of the mind. But obviously then these became hidden because once you did have that solid establishment of the Catholic Church, it was really, built its power on the fact that it was uniform and there wasn't going to be things that were up for discussion. So discussion had to be put aside. So she talks about, she talks a lot about as well about sort of what Jewish people were believing. Obviously there was differences, and the Christian beliefs and the Gnostic beliefs and how these things differed. And there's some real key points that made them different. Orthodox Jews and Christians insist that a chasm separates humanity from its creator. God is wholly other. But some of the Gnostics who wrote these Gospels contradict this. Self-knowledge is knowledge of God. The self and the divine are identical. So this is a really important point for me of what the Gnostics believe, because that's something that I feel quite a strong connection to, that idea that you look for God internally and that you're not massively separated from God, that God is to be found in yourself, is really, really an exciting idea. I think it's got really good potentials and things like that for people, and it's something that people can search for on an individual level. It's I think it's more empowering. Okay, so some of the things that she talks about through this book, she sort of goes through these sort of key things that made these Gnostic Gospels very different to what became the Catholic Church. So I'm just reading through the chapters, there's the controversy over Christ's resurrection, historical event or symbol. So some of the Gnostics did think that it was a genuine historical event, that Christ was resurrected as a man, dying and then rising, whereas other people thought it was symbolic, that perhaps he came spiritually back, or perhaps he never really died, or perhaps Christ was never even here in that human form anyway. It's really, anything's open to debate if you can really think about it and put forward a suggestion and an argument in a way that's actually going to help people spiritually. And this was sort of a key thing about the Gnostic movement, is that there is no set beliefs. It's very fluid and it's always open for reassessment. And people were encouraged to assess their ideas and think about what they really thought and try and verbalise that. So you have a really wide range of opinions. Obviously in the Catholic Church it's very much that this is an actual historical event that happened. Okay, then you have one God, one bishop, the politics of monotheism. So they all believe in one God, but it's how do you access that God? Do you access that God through your own devotion and contemplation and actions, or do you access it through a church structure? do you find the answers from somebody who can tell you the best way to do things, or do you try and decide that for yourself? What, like, the structure? And there's God the Father, God the Mother, and this is really about, in the Gnostic, not always, but a lot of them are much more inclusive of women and allow women to have much more of an equal role. I'm going to like that. Okay, the Passion of Christ and the persecution of Christians. So this is about the martyrdom of Christ. And in these early centuries, there were a lot of Christians who were martyred. And it's talking about whether that is something which you are expected to do, or something that is wanted for you to do. And some of the Gnostics argued that it wasn't, and that you should protect your own life and then live it in the best way, rather than allowing yourself to be martyred, say merely for being a Christian, rather than for actually actions that have put you in that position, potentially. Okay, and then whose church is the true church? And so there's a lot of arguing about who's right, and whatever else. And obviously the Catholic Church becomes very established in what it thinks, whereas the Gnostic Church continued to diverge and have different opinions, and it couldn't maintain the force that it had. Okay, and then Gnosis, self-knowledge as knowledge of God. Right, so I have got a few quotes. It was such an interesting book. So she talks as well about the suppression of the find of these Nag Hammadi scrolls, and how they were hidden for a while, and there was a lot of secret selling of them and moving around of them, until they've sort of eventually been photographed and studied. I mean, it's just frightening, really, that something so important can disappear so easily as well. So this quote is about the sort of, we're talking here in the first chapter about the controversy over Christ's resurrection. The Gnostics have a sort of sketchier or different opinion. It's more fluid. Okay, so Jesus rose from the grave. With this proclamation, the Christian church began. This may be the fundamental element of Christian faith. Certainly it is the most radical. Other religions celebrate cycles of birth and death. Christianity insists that in one unique historical moment, the cycle reversed and a dead man came back to life. Okay, so then this chapter talks about what that means and how the Gnostics differed in that opinion. Okay, this is another quote. So, all Christians agreed in principle that only Christ himself, or God, can be the ultimate source of spiritual authority. But the immediate question, of course, was the practical one. Who, in the present, administers that authority? Okay, so this is this thing about they all believe in the sort of one God that you can go through, directly to God or through Christ. But it's what route should you take to that? They argued that only one's own experience offers the ultimate criterion of truth, taking precedence over all second-hand testimony and all tradition, even Gnostic tradition. They celebrated every form of creative invention as evidence that a person has become spiritually alive. On this theory, the structure of authority can never be fixed into an institutional framework. It must remain spontaneous, charismatic, and open. Okay, so they're saying you can't just trust what somebody else has said and take it on their word. You've got to live this for yourself and be part of the experience for yourself. Okay, so a few other thoughts on the book. There was talks about serpents again. Okay, so you may know that I have issues with this serpent thing, because it's like related to God or divinity, and I don't feel that works. And this kind of thing that it's like wisdom or strength or no, not snakes. Like, there's just so many other animals or entities that you could pick that show wisdom or strength or creativity or whatever. Snakes just don't do it for me. So this got me thinking about the word serpent and what does the word serpent, because that is the word they use. If you look up the word, what does the word serpent mean? It will say like snake or whatever. But then I was thinking, like, when I've read about dragons before, dragons are also often referred to as serpents. So I was thinking that maybe serpent, the word, relates more of a dragony entity. I know this is like far out, but because dragons, there's like stories about dragons or dragon type things in like everywhere in history. There's just tons of dragons, and dragon, I can get the kind of more wisdom and strength and creativity and stuff. Definitely much more than a snake. Snakes are horrible. I'm sorry, but they are. Okay. So that was a little thought that I had while I was reading this book. Another thing that I liked in this book, she talked about the word redemption. That so the Gnostics said that they're looking for redemption, and this is described as release from the demiurge. So the demiurge is the kind of false god that did the kind of hands-on work of actually creating the world, and then thought that they were actually the real god. And I think it's supposed to be like the God of the Old Testament. So this is their idea, that this lower god created the world, like physically, and then felt that they were the actual god and wanted to be worshipped and things like that. But they aren't. And I mean that this is such an interesting idea because it feeds into the whole idea that we're sort of trapped on this earth in this system that we may well have agreed to come into, but we're very sort of manipulated and misled while we're here. So we are looking for redemption or release from the demiurge, this sort of fake world that has been created around us. Another thing that's really interesting that she spoke about was the rivalry between Mary Magdalene and the male disciples, particularly Paul. Paul's ideas, which is really interesting because obviously Mary Magdalene is a woman, one of the few women, and a lot of the Gnostics actually really seem to revere her and hold her up as something quite high. There's a lot of ideas that she was probably, like married to Jesus and things like that, so she would have been a very important person in his life, and her ideas would have been important. So these are really, really interesting ideas to think about, and it really allows us to look at Jesus's teachings and the things in sort of like a whole new light. Okay, so a couple of quotes. This is from the chapter Whose Church is the True Church. Gnostic Christians, on the contrary, assert that what distinguishes the false from the true church is not its relationship to the clergy, but the level of understanding of its members and the quality of their relationship with one another. Okay, so what they're saying is it's not about your structure and about how much everybody believes in what the bishop says. It's about your personal understanding and your personal involvement in living these beliefs. Such ethereal visions of the heavenly church contrast sharply with the down-to-earth portrait of the church that orthodox sources offer. Okay, so that's all sort of self-explanatory. It's sort of that same point. Okay, this is talking about self-knowledge as knowledge of God. So few psychiatrists would disagree with the saying attributed to Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas: "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Okay, that's something that you can, a quote that you can really ponder on for a long time and think about the real value of that. Such insight comes gradually through effort. Recognise what is before your eyes, and what is hidden will be revealed to you. Such Gnostics acknowledge that pursuing gnosis engages each person in a solitary, difficult process as one struggles against internal resistance. They characterised this resistance to gnosis as the desire to sleep or to be drunk, that is, to remain unconscious. That's really interesting. I think if you're somebody who is interested in this stuff and you take it joyfully, seriously, and you want to understand and learn more, it can feel like that when you see what feels like the rest of the world sort of drunk asleep in unconsciousness. So that's a really interesting quote. Okay. So, how is one to realise that potential? Okay. Many of the Gnostic sources cited so far contain only aphorisms directing the disciple to search for knowledge, but refraining from telling anyone how to search. Discovering that for oneself is apparently the first step towards self-knowledge. Thus, in the Gospel of Thomas, the disciples asked Jesus to tell them what to do. His disciples questioned him and said to him, "Do you want us to fast? How shall we pray? Shall we give alms? What diet shall we observe?" Jesus said, "Do not tell lies, and do not do what you hate." His ironic answer turns them back to themselves. Who but oneself can judge when one is lying or what one hates? I think that's like just one of the most powerful quotes ever, because, you know, people now and through history are always trying to think like about the right way to live or the moral thing to do, and nowadays that can seem things that people might have thought was very immoral one time, but it's like what is right. People, you know, have this obsession with what is the right thing to do, and you know, let's just take as an example diet. Some people are like agree with that you should fast and it's purifying. Some people think you should, you know, be vegan and that's good for your body and everything. And other things, you know, you've got to eat lots of meat. And it's just interesting. This thing, everybody's looking for the right answer, the right way to do things. But it's really much more basic than that, and they're really sort of outer accoutrements rather than the sort of personal, real, powerful, seemingly simple answers that are the hardest things to actually do. Okay, right, this quote is in the conclusion. This solitude derives from the Gnostics' insistence on their primacy of immediate experience. No one else can tell another which way to go, what to do, how to act. The Gnostic could not accept on faith what others said, except as a provisional measure until one found one's own path. For, as the Gnostic teacher Heracleon says, people at first are led to believe in the Saviour through others, but when they become mature, they no longer rely on mere human testimony, but discover instead their own immediate relationship with the truth itself. It's so profound, isn't it? There's so much in here. It's just so strong. It's like I'm very into personal empowerment. I don't like power structures or authoritarian structures or anything, and I really believe in you know, looking within and finding the answers there, and I think those hardest things in life are to be honest, and you know, I think that's the key to unlocking everything is honesty, and it's very, very hard. And also not living a lie is again a very difficult thing to do, but these are probably the most powerful things that we can do. Obviously in our society, everything's a bit messed up, but it's focusing, instead of looking at the power structures and thinking about what needs to be changed there, it's really about looking at yourself and looking that way to change things. So this book was really, really exciting for me. I really enjoyed it. There was many bits in it that were just really wonderful and profound, and really just sort of verbalized in a very clear, succinct, powerful way things that I have felt you know, more and more strongly over the years. So that was a really good book. Really enjoyed it. Anyway, I'm done with that now. I've got to take it back to the library. Got that from the library, so you always got to look at the library, see if you can get the book there before you go out and buy it. Now I'm reading another book that was suggested to me, which is Star Signs by Linda Goodman, and I'm nearly through that now actually, so I'll definitely be doing a review for that next month. Okay, so I'll see you then. Thank you.